Okay, hello to all of you. Let's discuss the last chapter of the course, which is evolution. And let's go to the slideshow mode. Okay, I hope you understand what evolution basically means. So, basically, the whole biology is standing on the theory of evolution. Okay, nothing in biology makes sense except in the light of evolution. So, the whole biology is standing on the theory of evolution. This is a very, very important theory. So we'll discuss about what evolution is and how the whole biological world has emerged. It's all because of the evolution, the process of evolution. So a new era of biology began in 1859 when Charles Darwin published the book Origin of Species. So this book basically focuses on the great diversity of organisms, which means that this book talks about that the whole biological world is very diverse and there are so many species in the biological world, and all these species which we see around, the diversity we see around is all because of the process of evolution. And the process of evolution basically states that over the time there was some changes in the environment and some pressure was imposed on the organisms. And in a population, always the organisms, they are different from each other. There is always diversity. So the organisms who can bear or the organisms who can adapt to the environment, they are the ones which are selected by the nature, and the ones which are selected by nature are those are the ones which are going to survive. And the organisms who survive, they are the ones who are going to reproduce and propagate those. So those organisms which will survive, they will reproduce, and they will be propagating themselves. It basically means that the because they are selected by nature by the process of natural selection, they have some um, advantageous characteristics in them, which goes back to the genes in them, so those genes or those alleles, they are actually selected over the time. So Charles Darwin is the main scientist um, who basically gave this theory, and his very, very famous book, The Origin of Species. Life's endless forms, most beautiful and most wonderful, have been and are being evolved. This is a statement given by Charles Darwin. So this is just showing you the biological world. You can see how diverse the biological world is, starting from the very simple form of life going to the most complex form of life. So we have a lot of diversity in the biological world. So Charles Darwin theory of evolution. Um, Hold on. So Darwin proposed that organisms descended from common ancestors. Organisms change with time, diverging from a common ancestor, and it caused the evolution of new species. So you can see here. So Darwin stated that the organisms, they have originated from the common ancestor, like you can see here. So this is the most common ancestor, and how you can see all these birds, they have originated from this bird basically. Okay, and so organisms, they change with time, diverging from the common ancestor. So they all started from here, and then they kept on changing, and at one point the change becomes so big that there is the formation of a different species, or it causes the evolution of new species. And behind the process of evolution, the main driving force is natural selection. So what is natural selection? Natural selection means selection by the nature. So nature actually chooses those organisms. So nature actually imposes a pressure on the organisms, or a challenge on the organisms. And always in a population there is a diversity. So diversity means in a population there are different kinds of organisms, and those organisms are different because they have different genes in them. And the different genes in different organisms in a population are different because of mutations happening. So so the organisms which have advantageous characteristics or a beneficial characteristics, and if they have a beneficial characteristics or the advantageous characteristics, it goes back to the genes they have or the alleles they have. So when the nature imposes a pressure or a challenge to the organisms with the advantageous characteristics will be selected by the nature, because those organisms with advantageous characteristics, they adapt best to the nature. So they will be selected, and the ones which are selected, they are going to survive, and the ones which survive, they are going to reproduce and increase the organisms of the same kind. So this is basically natural selection, okay, selection by the nature. So, and this is the driving force for evolution. So during the struggle for resources, the strongest survive and reproduce. So struggle for resources is a kind of a pressure which the nature imposes. So if in a population there are a lot of organisms but the food is less, then this is a kind of a pressure, this is a kind of a challenge the organisms they have to face or bear. So in those conditions, the organisms which can adapt best to the environment, they are the ones which are going to survive, and the ones which survive, they are the ones which are going to reproduce and propagate their own kinds. So idea that at least some of the differences between organisms which impact their survival and fertility are inheritable. So here is one example, like you can see here, these are some bugs. So you can see that if this is a population, and so these are some insects. So if they are living in this field, so if the insecticides are applied, okay, now you can see this is the population of these insects, and in these insects they have if you see in these 5 insects, there is one insect which has this red mutant allele, okay, and these one, they have all green genes. So when the insecticides are applied, so all these insects with green genes, they are all dying. The only survivor is the one with this red gene. So this red gene is a mutated gene. So it means that this insect has a beneficial characteristic, and this beneficial characteristics, because of which this insect can resist the attack of these insecticides, is because this insect has a mutant red allele. It has a mutant allele. Red is just to show, okay, it has a mutant allele. Because of this mutant allele, this insect is a survivor. And this one single insect which is survivor is going to reproduce, and it is going to propagate itself. So it means that in a population, the insects with this mutant allele, they are going to propagate. So in a population, there will be propagation of this mutant allele. So this is what is natural selection. This is another example of natural selection in the bacteria. So when the bacteria, they are for the treatment of bacteria, the antibiotics are used, and in the population of the bacteria, some bacteria are very resistant to the antibiotics and some are not. Some are sensitive to the antibiotics. So the bacteria which are sensitive to the antibiotics, they will die. So you can see here, this is a population of the bacteria, and the susceptibility to the antibiotics is shown with different colors, and this is the range shown here, or resistance level shown here. The yellow means less resistance, going towards the red color they have the high resistance. So this is the population with different level of the sensitivity to the antibiotics. So after so all the sensitive the bacteria which are sensitive to the antibiotics, they will be dying when the antibiotics are given. So the only the only bacteria which will be able to survive will be the ones which have resistant genes in them. So basically means that when we apply the antibiotic, all the sensitive bacteria will die. Only the resistant ones will be surviving. And when they survive, so when they survive, they are further going to propagate themselves. They are going to reproduce, and they are going to form the population, and they are going to form the population with the bacteria having the resistant genes. So this is another example of natural selection. So this is all what I just said. Okay, so how do we define evolution? So it's a change over time. It's a change over time. It's a process by which the modern organisms have differed from the ancient organisms. So we can also define evolution as a change in the allele frequency in a population over generations. And there are three main mechanisms which can change the allele frequency. They include natural selection, which we just discussed. Then there are another processes like genetic drift and gene flow. Only natural selection consistently causes adaptive evolution, because natural selection is on the basis of it's a kind of a selection process which basically involves the selection on the basis of some characteristics. So that's why it's called adaptive evolution. So natural selection, as we just discussed, I will go over it because we already discussed. So selection results in alleles being passed to the next generation in proportions that differ from those in the present generation. For example, an allele confirms resistance to the DDT in fruit flies increased in frequency after DDT was used widely in the agriculture, because after you apply DDT, all the flies with the which are sensitive to they are going to die. The only the flies which are going to be surviving will be the ones which are resistant to DDT. So it basically increases. So in a population there is a increase in the frequency of the allele for DDT resistance. So natural selection can cause adaptive evolution, a process in which traits that enhance survival or reproduction increase in frequency over time. So basically you can see that this is just showing a population of some insects. So the background is brown and you have some insects with brown color of their body or the green color of the body. So the insects which have brown color, they will be the color of their coat will be actually merging with the color of the coat of the insect will be merging with the ground. So if there is some kind of a bird or a predator, so in this case the bird which is more visible to the bird, which will be green, because these insects, their body coat is actually merging with the background. So the bird will not be able to see them. So these are the ones, the insects with green color, they are the ones which are going to be more easily recognized by the bird. They will be eaten by the bird. And as a result of that, what is going to happen? As a result of that, the insects with green color, they will be decreasing from the population, and the bird with the brown alleles, they will be propagating. So you can see here you have the bug with green color, the bug with brown color. So the bird is going to um, see these insects, and as a result of that, they'll be eaten by the bird. So the green bugs will be decreasing over the time, and the bugs with the brown color, those bugs are going to be increasing over the time. Another example of natural selection is peppered moth. So basically, in the old times, during the Industrial Revolution, the trees on which the moth rested became soot covered. Okay, now, so it means that the trees were covered with the soot, which means the trees were like black in color. So these are the two moths. You can see this is light colored moth, or they called peppered moth, and these are the ones which are dark. So these are the ones when they are going to be sitting on the trees, their color actually merges with the color of the trees. So these moths will not be recognized by the predators. So these kind of moths, they'll be recognized and they will be just killed by the predators, and they will be their frequency is going to decrease. And these moths, they are the ones which are going to be surviving, and because they survive, they are going to reproduce and they are going to propagate. So the allele for this color will be actually selected by the nature. So this is another example of natural selection. So this selected against the allele for pale color in the population which were poorly camouflaged from the predators, and selected for the dark color allele. Okay, so this was all about the natural selection. Now we are going to move towards genetic drift. So genetic drift is basically it's also change in allele frequency, but it is not on the basis of some criteria. It is something happening just by chance. Okay, so like natural selection is on the basis of some criteria. Nature chooses organisms on the basis of some of the characteristics these birds or the organisms they have. So genetic drift also involves change in allele frequency, but it is not on the basis of some criteria. It is something happens just by chance, but definitely there is a change in the allele frequency. The effect of genetic drift is more if the population is small. The smaller a sample, the greater the chance of random variation from a predicted result. And genetic drift tends to reduce genetic variation through the random loss of alleles. Okay, here is example. Like you can see here, this is the population of these insects. There are some green, there are some brown, right? And suppose somebody is walking and a person walks on these the population of these insects. Now when the person is walking on these insects, so that person is not walking on basis of some criteria. It's something the person is walking now because of like it's just a chance that these green insects chance come under the foot of this person. So as a result of that, they are going to be dying. So which means that the insects with the green color, they are going to be eliminated from the population, and these are the survivors. These insects with brown color, they are the survivors. Because they're surviving, they will be selected. So it means that these brown these insects with brown color of the coat, they are the ones which are selected, and because they're selected, they are going to reproduce. So they are the ones, they are the survivors, they are reproduce, and in future the population will be having the insects with this kind of the color. So after time you will see the population will be having more insects with brown color. Now here like this person stepping on the population of insects and the green ones getting killed is not on the basis of any characteristics. It is something happening just by chance. So this is what genetic drift is. The founder effect is basically occurs when a few individuals become isolated from a large population. So the founder effect is if there's a population and some of the individuals they leave the population and then they just get separated. So founder effect occurs when a few individuals become isolated from a large population. So allele frequencies in the smaller founder population will be different from the large parent population. Example is pollens, like pollens moving to distant places. The next one is bottleneck effect. Now, bottleneck effect occurs when there is a drastic reduction in population size due to sudden change in environment. Okay, so the resulting gene pool may no longer be reflective of the original population's gene pool. Here is a very good example to show you the bottleneck effect. Like you can see here, this is a bottle, and in the bottle you can see the beads of all different colors. Okay, now if we just pass these beads through this neck, and suppose the beads which are coming out, okay, the beads which are coming out are of blue color and the yellow color. So this is the bottleneck effect, that when we try to bring these beads out of this bottle through this bottleneck, suppose these are the only colors out, okay, and now which color is coming out? It is again just by chance, okay. And now because all the red and green ones are not coming out, only blue and yellows are coming out, in future the new population will be having only yellow and blue alleles. So similarly, bottleneck effect is it's a kind of some event which basically reduces the population. Okay, so that is what bottleneck effect is. Any kind of event like an earthquake, flood, or disease. Suppose an earthquake happens, or a flood is there, or some disease happens, and as a result of that, some of the individuals they die because of these natural disasters or some changes in the environment. Because of that, lot of organisms they die, and some are survivors. Okay, now earthquake, flood, or disease does not follow any criteria. So because of these events, if some of the organisms die, those organisms they are dying just by chance. And after that, when some organisms die, there are some survivors. The survivors which have survived, they have not survived special characteristics. It has happened just by chance. And as a result of that, what will happen will be the next population or the new population which will be formed by the survivors will be rich in only those alleles, or it will be having only those alleles. So here example of bottleneck effect, northern elephant seals. Okay, northern elephant seals, because of hunting, lot of these seals died, and the number was reduced only to 20. Because of hunting, the population size was reduced to 20. Now when the hunting is taking place, there's no specific criteria, because of some of the seals die. Okay, so the only survivors are 20, and their population has since rebounded. So this is the real example. So their population has since rebounded to over 30,000, but their genes still carry the marks of this bottleneck, which means that because this population of 3,000 seals is actually from these 20 individuals, so basically their genes, because these all 30,000 organisms they have originated from only 20 organisms, they don't have much higher genetic variation in them. So they have much less genetic variation than a population of southern elephant seals. That was not okay. So basically the bottleneck effect can actually reduce the genetic variation, because the organisms which are forming a population, they have formed only from very limited organisms. Okay. So in short about genetic drift is significant in small populations. Genetic drift can cause allele frequencies to change at random. Genetic drift can lead to loss of genetic variation within populations. And the last one is gene flow. So gene flow is basically when the organisms they are moving from one place to another place. So some people moving from different countries, um, from different continents. So they are bringing their genes with them. So that also changes the allele frequency in a population. And the individuals who are moving from one population, from one place to another place, they're bringing new alleles. So those alleles which they're bringing, they can bring good alleles, they can bring bad alleles, and this kind of a process can even reduce the variation among the populations over time. So what is gene flow? Consists of movement of alleles among populations. Alleles can be transferred through movement of fertile individuals of gametes. Okay, so there can be um, people moving from Europe to America, America to Europe or Spain. So when people are moving around, they are taking their genes with them, their alleles with them, and they can cause the change in the allele frequency of a population. So the alleles can be transferred through the movement of fertile individuals or through gametes. For example, pollens. Pollens are gametes. Gene flow can increase the fitness of a population. Yes, definitely. If the moving population is actually bringing the good genes or the good alleles. Uh, for example, the spread of alleles for the resistance to insecticides. Insecticides have been used to target mosquitoes that carry West Nile virus and malaria. Alleles have evolved in some populations that confer insecticide resistance to these mosquitoes. The flow of insecticide resistant alleles into population can cause an increase in the fitness. So you can see here these are two populations. So the insect from this population is moving into this population. Okay, so because of that, some of the alleles from this population are moving into this population. So this is called gene flow. So genetic drift and gene flow do not consistently increase the frequency of alleles that enhance survival and reproduction. So as these processes are not on the basis of any selective criteria. So they do not increase the frequency of those alleles which enhance survival and reproduction, because these are the events they just by chance. Both processes may increase or decrease the frequency of beneficial alleles in a population. It can increase, it can decrease too. So that's all about gene flow, and this is just showing how the fossil record. So this is basically showing like how our biological world is diverse and how the biological world is formed by the process of evolution. So the fossil record shows a sequence from simple bacteria, so this is bacteria, to the most complicated organisms through time, and provides the most compelling evidence of evolution. So we started from here, we have reached up to here. All these stages which we have gone through is all because of the process of evolution. So all the diversity of the biological world is because of the process of evolution. Okay, so this is just something to think about. What do you think? Is cancer an evolutionary process? And this is a book, recommended reading if you would like to read this book. This is by Bill. So this all book is a process. So that's all in this chapter. If you have any question, please let me know.